On an ordinary evening in a quiet London street, Hercule Poirot was engrossed in his work when an unusual and chilling letter arrived. Sir John Willard, a renowned archaeologist, had written seeking his help a terrifying message about an ancient Egyptian tomb. The tomb, once uncovered, had been the source of a string of mysterious deaths. But this curse was no mere tale, it was a story of revenge. Can Poirot uncover the truth behind this terrifying curse, or will it claim him too? It was a drizzly, unremarkable afternoon in London. The kind of weather that drapes the city in a gray blanket, making everything seem a little heavier, a little more mysterious. The steady ticking of the clock echoed in Hercule Poirot's quiet apartment, the only sound piercing through the otherwise still atmosphere. But then, the silence was shattered by the sharp rattle of the letterbox. Poirot, seated in his chair, meticulously polishing his shoes, did not flinch. His mind, always sharp, always observing, had learned to sense when something was afoot. As he rose and crossed the room, his gaze flicked to the small envelope resting in the hallway. It was an oddity. There were no stamps, no markings to indicate its sender, but its weight, the subtle crease in the paper, spoke of importance. With a practiced hand, he slit the envelope open, the paper crisp, almost too new to have passed through time. Inside, there was only a single, hastily written note. Monsieur Poirot, I beg of you, come to Egypt. The tomb of the pharaoh Amenhotep has been unearthed, but since then, a terrible fate has followed us. Members of the expedition are dying one by one. I am the last to remain, and I fear for my life. Please, Poirot, you are the only one who can solve this mystery before it's too late. The handwriting was shaky, desperate, and Poirot's brow furrowed. Sir John Willard, renowned archaeologist, known for his tireless pursuit of the past, had sent this. Yet something about the letter felt wrong. Why was it so urgent? Why the cryptic mention of a terrible fate? And why was Poirot, of all people, summoned to Egypt? Poirot sat down at his desk, the wheels in his mind already turning, as his fingers traced the delicate letter. His thoughts were interrupted by the soft ringing of the telephone. A chill ran down his spine as he lifted the receiver, his senses on high alert. Poirot. A familiar voice crackled through the line. It's Inspector Japp. I believe you've received a letter from Sir John Willard. It seems, well, something's off. We've just received reports of strange deaths surrounding his excavation. You need to go, Poirot. There's more to this than a simple case of bad luck. Poirot's mind was racing now. The idea of a curse had always seemed absurd to him, the stuff of old wives' tales. But these deaths, these whispers of misfortune, were far too real to ignore. And Sir John had gone to great lengths to personally request his aid. With a slow, deliberate movement, Poirot put the receiver back in place and turned his gaze to the window. The rain had intensified, now pounding against the glass like a drumbeat, as if urging him towards something unknown. A chilling thought crossed his mind. If the tomb of Amenhotep had truly been unearthed, what had they disturbed beneath the sand? The first clue had arrived in the form of a letter. Now only time would tell if it was a message of doom or the key to unlocking a far greater mystery. Poirot's lips curled into a thoughtful smile. It seemed the stage was set for a new case, one unlike any other. He reached for his coat and hat, his determination hardening. The game was afoot. As he stepped into the dreary London streets, the weight of the unknown seemed to press in on him. What was the truth behind these deaths? Was it a mere coincidence, or was there a hand guiding the shadows, orchestrating the madness? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain: Poirot would not rest until the truth was uncovered, no matter how dark it may be. And as the train bound for Egypt began its journey, a chilling thought lingered in Poirot's mind. What if the truth itself is the most dangerous curse of all? Cliffhanger ending. The sun had long since disappeared beneath the horizon as Poirot's train rumbled across the Egyptian desert. The night air grew colder with every passing minute, and Poirot's mind never wavered from the mystery at hand. He stared out at the barren landscape, his eyes narrowing as the darkened tomb of Amenhotep loomed in his thoughts. Then, a sound. Faint at first, but unmistakable. A whisper in the wind, and within the whisper, a name.
Poirot."
The voice carried on the breeze, soft but insistent, and Poirot's heart skipped a beat. Who had called his name? He turned sharply to look around the compartment, but there was no one else. Just the stillness of the night and the relentless movement of the train. He was alone. Or so he thought. As the whisper echoed in his mind, one thought pierced through. The curse had already found him. The investigation begins. The sun hung low over the endless expanse of the Egyptian desert, casting long shadows across the archaeological site. Hercule Poirot stepped from the dusty jeep, his polished shoes clicking on the parched earth as he surveyed the remains of the tomb. The air smelled faintly of decay, a mixture of sand and ancient history, but it was the eerie stillness that made the hairs on the back of his neck prickle. The excavation site was like something out of a forgotten dream. Massive stone structures stood half-submerged in the sand, their once grand carvings now chipped and eroded by centuries of neglect. Yet, despite the significance of the discovery the tomb of Pharaoh Amenhotep, long lost to history, the mood among the team was anything but celebratory. Sir John Willard stood nearby, his face drawn and pale. His eyes darted nervously to the shadows, his hands wringing together in an agitated motion. It was a stark contrast to the man who had once spoken with such enthusiasm about this momentous find. Behind him, the team of archaeologists appeared equally shaken, their faces gaunt, their movements slow and hesitant. Poirot's gaze flicked over them all. Something was not right. "You see, Monsieur Poirot," Sir John began, his voice trembling, "we have unearthed wonders. Yes, but with them, misfortune. One by one, members of my team have passed. Some say it's a curse. I say it's something more." Poirot raised an eyebrow. The idea of a curse was laughable to him. Yet the growing number of deaths at the site could not be ignored. Each death had been followed by whispers of the pharaoh's curse, an ancient warning that had apparently come to life with the disturbing events. But Poirot, ever the skeptic, dismissed superstition. He was a man of logic, and there had to be something else, something more concrete. He nodded politely, his eyes already scanning the surroundings, noting the subtle shift in the atmosphere. The air was thick with fear, the kind of fear that makes people look over their shoulders in broad daylight. He observed how each member of the team seemed to avoid each other's gaze, as though hiding something. "Where is the library?" Poirot asked, his voice calm yet authoritative. Sir John pointed vaguely toward a structure off to the side. "Through there, you'll find everything you need." Poirot made his way toward the small building, his mind whirring. He was already forming a hypothesis. There was more to these deaths than mere chance or a curse. There was something or someone on the inside manipulating events, pulling strings behind the scenes. As he stepped into the dimly lit library, the smell of old paper hit him immediately. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with dusty tomes and crumbling scrolls. But it wasn't the books that caught his attention, it was the small wooden desk in the corner. Something about it felt significant. His sharp eyes scanned the surface. Papers were strewn about, many of them hastily written and clearly disorganized. And there, tucked underneath a pile of old journals, was a worn leather-bound diary. The name on the cover made Poirot pause. Dr. Alexander Cromwell, the first archaeologist to discover the tomb, and the man who had mysteriously vanished years ago under equally mysterious circumstances. Poirot carefully opened the diary, the pages fragile and yellowed with age. As he read the first few entries, a chill settled over him. Dr. Cromwell spoke of strange occurrences, missing artifacts, unexplained phenomena, and his growing fear that someone or something was sabotaging the dig. The last entry, however, was the most disturbing. "I fear for my life. The tomb's secrets are not meant to be uncovered. I believe the curse is real. I am being watched." Poirot's pulse quickened. The diary was a crucial piece of the puzzle, but it only raised more questions. Who had watched Dr. Cromwell? And why had the curse, or whatever it was, followed the team to this day? Suddenly, a soft rustle behind him interrupted his thoughts. Poirot's body tensed, his mind instantly alert. He turned quickly, but there was nothing, no one. The room was still, the shadows lingering in the corners like silent witnesses. Poirot? It was Miss Evelyn Drake, Sir John's assistant. She stepped into the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice a touch too soft, too careful. Poirot nodded, though his eyes never left her. There was something in her demeanor, something off. She had been unusually nervous ever since his arrival, and he had noticed her lingering near the tomb after dark. But now her sudden appearance in the library seemed too coincidental. Everything is fine," Poirot said smoothly, closing the diary with deliberate care. "But perhaps, mademoiselle, you can help me understand something. Dr. Cromwell, did he have any enemies? Anyone who might have wished him harm?" Evelyn's eyes flickered for just a moment, but it was enough. Poirot didn't miss it. "Enemies. Dr. Cromwell was passionate about his work, but no, I don't think so," she replied, her voice just a touch too steady. Poirot gave her a small, knowing smile. "Interesting," he said quietly, turning back to the desk and carefully slipping the diary into his coat. "And now, mademoiselle, I think it is time we speak with Sir John. I believe the truth is buried deeper than we thought." As Poirot left the library, a nagging feeling lingered in the back of his mind. Evelyn Drake was hiding something. He could sense it, like a shadow trailing behind her every movement. But what? Cliffhanger ending. The wind had begun to pick up outside, sending gusts of sand swirling into the air. Poirot's footsteps echoed through the excavation site as he approached Sir John's tent. But just as he reached the entrance, something caught his eye, a flash of movement in the distance. He stopped dead in his tracks. Someone was moving swiftly toward the tomb. Poirot's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the silhouette. Miss Evelyn Drake. But why would she be heading to the tomb alone at this hour? Poirot's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle shifting in place. There was something she wasn't telling him. Something she was desperate to keep hidden. He turned to follow, but as he moved closer, the tomb's entrance loomed before him. Dark, foreboding and silent, as if holding its breath. Poirot's instinct screamed at him to stop. Something was about to happen. Something that would change everything. And in the distance, just as Evelyn reached the entrance of the tomb, a light flickered from within, a shadow passing across the doorway. Poirot's pulse quickened. What was inside the tomb? And why did Evelyn seem so determined to keep him out? The mystery deepened, and Poirot was about to find himself in the heart of something far darker than he could have ever imagined. The suspect's first twist. Poirot's investigation had brought him closer to the heart of the mystery, and the deeper he dug, the more unsettling the truths became. The atmosphere at the excavation site had grown colder, the once vibrant team of archaeologists now fragmented, their faces shadowed by something darker than the setting sun. As Poirot sat in his small, dimly lit tent, the sound of wind howling through the desert outside seemed to mirror the turbulence brewing within the team. With each passing moment, the tension between the members of the team grew more palpable, as though invisible threads were pulling them closer together and further apart all at once. Poirot had observed them all with the scrutiny only he could muster. And now, he needed to dig deeper into their pasts. He began with Sir John Willard, the leader of the excavation and the one who had reached out to Poirot for help. The archaeologist was a man of considerable reputation, but beneath his facade of dignity, Poirot sensed something else, an underlying fear, a hesitation that spoke volumes. Sir John had spoken about the tomb with reverence, but there was an edge in his voice whenever he referred to the deaths that had followed the discovery. Was it guilt or something far worse? Poirot's mind raced as he reviewed the facts. Sir John had been struggling financially before the dig, according to a few offhand comments from some of the team members. He had even taken out a loan to fund the excavation, hoping the discovery of the pharaoh's tomb would bring him the fame and fortune he desperately needed. But was it possible that this thirst for glory had led him to take risks that put his entire team in danger? Poirot turned his attention to the other members of the team. Evelyn Drake, Sir John's assistant, was a mystery in herself. Poirot had already noticed the unease she radiated. She was beautiful, with sharp eyes that hid something beneath the surface, a nervous energy that never seemed to fade. Evelyn had been the one to bring Poirot into the fold, yet she had been quick to dismiss the idea of a curse, almost too quickly. Could she be hiding something? Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a knock on his tent. He opened the flap to find Imran, a young archaeologist who had been working under Sir John for years. His nervous demeanor and shifty eyes didn't help his case. Imran was jittery, constantly looking over his shoulder, as if he feared the tomb's ancient curse more than the deadly deaths that had plagued the site. "Poirot," Imran said in a trembling voice, I need to talk to you." Poirot gestured for him to come in. I've been hearing things," Imran continued. His words rushed. "I'm not sure if I should say anything, but there's something strange happening here. I've seen Evelyn near the tomb late at night, and Sir John." He hesitated, as if weighing the consequences of his next words. "I don't trust him. He's been acting strangely distracted, paranoid, like he's hiding something." Poirot nodded slowly, his mind already running through the possibilities. Imran was clearly shaken, but his words were significant. The mention of Evelyn being near the tomb at night confirmed Poirot's suspicions. But Sir John, could he have known something more about the tomb than he had let on? Was the tomb's discovery just a means to an end, a ticket to fame, or was there something darker at play? Poirot leaned in closer, his voice calm but laced with intent. "Tell me, Imran, did you hear anything else? Anything that could help me understand what's truly happening here?" Imran swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. I saw a letter in Sir John's tent. It was from someone named Khalid, a name I've never heard before. The letter was sealed, and it looked old. Sir John seemed to be hiding it, even from Evelyn." Poirot's gaze hardened. This was more than just a curse. There were shadows lurking within the team, and Sir John was at the center of them. But there was more to uncover. Poirot stood and motioned for Imran to follow. "We must speak to Evelyn and Sir John. But first, there's one more thing I must investigate." Poirot walked briskly toward the library again, his thoughts swirling with more questions than answers. He needed to find the letter Imran mentioned. And if Sir John had been hiding it, it was only a matter of time before that letter revealed something catastrophic, something that could tie the deaths together. As Poirot rifled through the shelves of ancient books and dusty scrolls, his fingers brushed against something unexpected, a small, metal box, carefully hidden behind a stack of maps. His pulse quickened as he opened it, revealing a stack of yellowed papers. The first letter he pulled from the box was addressed to Sir John, in the same handwriting Imran had described. It was short, cryptic, and chilling. "The tomb's curse is real. You are not the only one who seeks it. The past is waiting for you. Do not let it rise again." Poirot's breath caught in his chest. The tone of the letter was unmistakable. This was no idle threat. Someone else was involved, someone with knowledge of the tomb's secrets, and they were not willing to let it rest. Just as Poirot read the last words, a loud crash echoed from outside the library, followed by hurried footsteps. Poirot quickly hid the letter back in the box and rushed toward the sound. What he found in the courtyard stopped him dead in his tracks. Sir John was standing in the middle of the site, his face ashen, his eyes wild with panic. Behind him, Evelyn stood frozen, her face pale as a ghost. "Poirot, you must help us," Sir John gasped, his voice shaking. "It's happened again. Another death. But this time, it's Imran." Poirot's heart raced. The pieces were starting to come together, but they were more fragmented than ever. Cliffhanger ending. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he turned to look at Evelyn, her expression unreadable. She had been so quick to dismiss the curse, yet here they were, another victim, another death. But something about her silence now, her lack of reaction, felt wrong. "Imran," Poirot whispered, his voice filled with dread. Who was the last person to see him alive?" Evelyn hesitated, her eyes flicking to Sir John before quickly darting away. "It doesn't matter," she replied coldly. "He's dead." But Poirot knew better. He could feel the tension in the air, thick as smoke. There was more here than met the eye, much more. And then, A shadow moved in the distance as slowly, deliberately. Someone was watching them. Poirot's mind raced. Could the answer be standing right in front of him? The light flickered, and the desert winds howled once more. But Poirot knew one thing for certain. The web of deception had only just begun to tighten around them. Sir John Willard. Sir John Willard was a man of many layers, and each layer seemed more troubling than the last. To the outside world, he was a renowned archaeologist, celebrated for his groundbreaking work in ancient Egyptian history. But beneath the surface, something darker pulsed. It was as though the tomb he had unearthed had begun to consume him, its secrets calling to him in a voice only he could hear. The excavation site had been his life's work, a dream that had consumed him for years. His ambition had driven him to take risks that most would have considered reckless. His team, loyal to a fault, had rallied around him, supporting his every move as he led them deeper into the mysteries of the tomb. But the further they dug, the more the shadows seemed to grow. Poirot had noticed the signs almost immediately. Sir John's frantic energy, the way his hands trembled when he spoke of the tomb, the subtle cracks in his calm demeanor that betrayed a man desperately clinging to control. He seemed to have lost sight of the purpose of the dig, his obsession blinding him to the growing dangers around him. Late at night, when the camp fell silent, Poirot had caught glimpses of Sir John standing alone at the edge of the excavation site, staring at the dark outline of the tomb, as though it were calling to him. His eyes were vacant, distant, as though his soul had already been claimed by whatever forces lay buried in that ancient burial ground. "It is more than just a tomb," Sir John had said to Poirot once, his voice hollow. "It is a door, a gateway, to something greater." Poirot had smiled politely, but a chill ran down his spine. Sir John's words didn't sit right with him. Something about the way he said it, like the words were too eager, too filled with a dark promise. And now, with the deaths mounting, Poirot wondered just how far Sir John had gone in his pursuit of the tomb's secrets. Was he willing to sacrifice everything, even the lives of his team, to unlock whatever it was hidden within those stone walls? Miss Evelyn Drake. Evelyn Drake was a puzzle Poirot had yet to fully solve. Young, beautiful, and intelligent, she was the perfect assistant, quick to learn, eager to prove herself, and always at Sir John's side. But as the days passed, Poirot began to notice something unsettling beneath her composed exterior. She was never quite like the others. While the rest of the team kept their distance, working diligently and cautiously, Evelyn seemed almost too eager. She'd often appear at odd hours, slipping away from the camp, her steps quiet and purposeful as she made her way toward the tomb. At first, Poirot had attributed it to a simple obsession with her work. But there was something more to it, something in the way she seemed drawn to the tomb, as though it were calling her too. She was always careful, always silent when she returned. But Poirot had caught her on more than one occasion, her eyes wide, her face pale, as though she had seen something in those dark chambers that no one else had. And her behavior around Sir John had become strange, an odd mixture of devotion and fear. She was clearly loyal, but her loyalty seemed to be shifting, becoming something more dangerous, as if the line between admiration and something darker was blurring. Poirot had tried to confront her, to ask her about her midnight visits to the tomb. But each time she denied everything, her smile quick and forced, her words unconvincing. There was no fear in her eyes when she spoke of the tomb, no caution, only a sense of urgency, a hunger. And that, Poirot realized, was the most disturbing thing of all. Could it be that Evelyn too was caught in the tomb's web? Was she as consumed by the mystery as Sir John, or was there something more sinister at play? As Poirot continued to observe, the more his suspicions grew. The two most important people at the excavation, Sir John and Evelyn, seemed intertwined in a web of obsession, secrecy, and fear. But the more Poirot uncovered, the more questions arose. What exactly was Sir John hiding? What had Evelyn seen in the tomb that had changed her? And was there more to the deaths than just a curse? Poirot's mind raced. The lines between fact and superstition were blurring, and every clue seemed to lead to more questions, more darkness. Then, one night, as Poirot prepared to retire for the evening, He was interrupted by a frantic knock at his door. It was Evelyn. Her face was white as a sheet, her eyes wild with panic. "Poirot," she whispered urgently, her voice trembling. "You have to come with me. It's Sir John. He's gone. He's disappeared." Poirot's heart skipped a beat, and without hesitation, he grabbed his coat and followed her into the night. The desert wind howled around them as they made their way to the tomb. As they neared, Poirot's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of something disturbing: footprints, faint but unmistakable, leading toward the tomb. But the tomb had been sealed shut. And yet, the footprints led right to it. Cliffhanger ending. Poirot's breath caught as he turned to Evelyn. Her face was unreadable, and yet, beneath her composed exterior, Poirot could sense the fear she was trying to hide. "Evelyn," he said softly, "tell me, what do you know about Sir John's disappearance?" Her eyes flickered nervously, and for the first time, Poirot saw doubt in them. She opened her mouth to speak, but stopped short, when a sudden, guttural sound echoed from within the tomb, a sound like someone or something scratching the stone walls. Poirot's pulse quickened. It wasn't just a tomb, it wasn't just a curse. Something in that tomb had woken up. The sound grew louder, more frantic, and Evelyn stepped back, her face drained of color. Poirot turned slowly toward the entrance, his heart racing. The tomb was alive. The midpoint, a deadly revelation. Poirot sat alone in the dimly lit library of the excavation site, the ancient diary spread out before him. The pages were yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. This was the diary of the first archaeologist who had uncovered the tomb, an eccentric man by the name of Professor Edward Thorne, who had mysteriously vanished shortly after making his discovery. According to the diary, Thorne had experienced a series of strange, unnerving events, each more disturbing than the last, all leading to his eventual disappearance. But there was one entry that stood out above the rest, a dark warning, etched in hurried, trembling handwriting. "Beware the curse. Do not disturb the tomb, for those who do will be marked by death. The gods will not forgive the trespassers." For weeks, the team had been whispering about a cursy supernatural force that had been responsible for the unexplained deaths. The archaeologists were convinced that the tomb was cursed, that the spirits of the ancient pharaohs were seeking revenge. But Poirot, ever the skeptic, didn't believe in curses. There had to be something more, something far more sinister at play. As he read the rest of the diary, Poirot began to form a theory. The deaths, he realized, were not the result of an ancient curse. No, this was no act of fate. Someone was orchestrating these deaths, manipulating fear to create panic, to destabilize the team. The pattern of the deaths was too perfect, too calculated. Each death, each tragic event, had been carefully planned, timed to coincide with moments when the team was at its weakest, when their fear was at its peak. But who was behind it? Poirot felt the weight of the mystery press down on him, and as he reached the final pages of the diary, a chilling thought crossed his mind. What if the killer wasn't just someone within the team? What if they were using the curse as a cover, something that would drive the archaeologists further into madness and self-doubt? What if this was all part of a larger, more sinister game? Someone wanted the excavation to fail, and they were willing to kill anyone who stood in their way. Poirot's musings were interrupted by a sudden, sharp scream from outside the library. He rushed to the window, his heart racing. There, in the dim light of the excavation pit, he saw the body of Dr. Victor Cunningham sprawled across the ground, lifeless. The scene was unlike any of the previous deaths. Cunningham's body was cold, but there was no sign of the usual terror in his expression, no wide-eyed panic, no contorted face. Instead, Cunningham's face was eerily serene, almost as if he had known what was coming. Poirot's pulse quickened. The pattern had been broken. This was no accidental death. This wasn't part of the curse. It was a murder. Poirot quickly made his way down to the excavation site, his mind racing. Cunningham had been one of the key figures in the team, his intellect sharp, his knowledge of the tomb invaluable. But it was his past that had always raised suspicions. Was his murder the result of a personal vendetta? Or was there something in Cunningham's own research that someone wanted to keep hidden? The other members of the team had gathered around Cunningham's body, their faces pale with shock and fear. Rajiv Kapoor stood at the back, his face tight with worry, while Evelyn Drake appeared almost faint, her hands trembling as she clutched a scarf around her neck. Poirot moved towards Sir John, who had his hand on his forehead, his expression one of deep frustration. "What happened?" Poirot asked quietly. Sir John looked up, his voice shaky. I don't know. He was fine just moments ago. He was in the pit, looking over the artifacts. Then we heard the scream." Poirot examined Cunningham's body carefully, his mind working in overdrive. There was something off about the scene. Cunningham's death didn't follow the same pattern as the others. There were no signs of struggle, no apparent cause of death. But then Poirot's sharp eyes spotted something small, almost imperceptible puncture wound near Cunningham's neck, hidden beneath his collar. A deadly poison. It had been carefully administered, likely in his drink or food. But the timing, it didn't add up. The murder was too precise, too methodical. Someone wanted Cunningham dead, but they also wanted to make a statement. This wasn't just a murder. This was part of a much larger plan that had been set in motion from the very beginning. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a quiet voice behind him. Evelyn Drake, her face pale and drawn, spoke in a trembling whisper. "It's happening, isn't it? The curse, it's real. We're all going to die." Poirot turned to her, his expression softening slightly. "No, Miss Drake, it is not a curse. It is murder. And the killer is one of you." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. The team froze, fear gripping them all. Poirot's eyes scanned the faces of those gathered. There was no remorse in their eyes, no guilt, only fear that the walls were closing in. Poirot had made a crucial discovery, but there was still so much to uncover. The deaths were not random. They were carefully orchestrated, each one designed to break the team's spirit. And now, with Dr. Cunningham's death, the stakes had escalated. But Poirot knew that someone in that group, someone who stood among them now, was the mastermind behind it all. And that person was growing more desperate by the minute. The air was thick with tension as Poirot turned to face the group. He knew it wouldn't be long before the killer struck again. Cliffhanger ending. Just as Poirot was about to speak, a loud crash echoed from the direction of the tomb entrance. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the sky above darkened unnaturally, as if in response to the growing tension. "What was that?" someone gasped, their voice barely audible. Poirot's eyes narrowed. He was certain this wasn't just a coincidence. The tomb had something inside it, something that was sending a warning. With a steady hand, Poirot gestured for everyone to follow him. "Stay close," he instructed. "We are going to find out who is behind this." But as they neared the entrance to the tomb, Poirot's sharp eyes caught a fleeting glimpse of movement, someone or something slipping into the darkness, vanishing into the shadows. A chill ran down Poirot's spine. Someone was already inside. Was the killer waiting for them? Or had they discovered something even more terrifying within the tomb's ancient walls? Poirot took a deep breath, and with the team gathered behind him, he stepped into the darkness, knowing that the real mystery was only just beginning. The final act, a twist unfolds. The tomb stood silent, its walls heavy with the weight of centuries, yet Poirot could sense something more, something alive beneath its ancient stones. The very air seemed thick with secrets. He stepped into the chamber, the team behind him, their eyes filled with fear and anticipation. They had followed him here, unsure of what would come next, but Poirot's unwavering confidence kept them at his side. The tomb was supposed to hold nothing but treasures, the wealth of a forgotten pharaoh. But as Poirot's eyes swept across the darkened chamber, he found something far more dangerous than gold, a hidden compartment carved into the wall. A secret entrance that had remained concealed for centuries, its existence ignored by every archaeologist before them. Poirot's heart quickened as he gently pried open the compartment. Inside, carefully folded and preserved, was an old journal. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Professor Thorne's, the first man to have uncovered the tomb. The entries were chaotic, filled with fevered scribblings and references to a betrayal that had torn the team apart years ago. One particular entry stood out. "I trusted him. I gave him my work, my reputation, and he destroyed it. He buried me with his lies, and now I will make him pay." Poirot's mind raced. Thorn hadn't just vanished. He had been erased. This wasn't just about a tombit, was about revenge. The key to understanding the deaths lay within these pages. Someone in the group had been using the curse as a distraction, orchestrating each death to cover their tracks. As Poirot pieced together the fragments, the realization hit him like a bolt of lightning. The murders weren't random, they were personal. Each death had been carefully timed to target the people who had wronged the killer. But who among the team had the motive to carry out such a twisted plan? Poirot closed the journal and looked over his shoulder, his gaze piercing through the dark. It was time to confront them. He turned to the others, his voice cold and steady. "I have uncovered the truth," he said, his eyes scanning the faces before him. "The one responsible for these murders is not a stranger to us. The killer is one of you." The group recoiled in shock. Sir John's face drained of color, and Evelyn Drake clutched her chest as if to stop her heart from racing. Rajiv Kapoor's jaw clenched, but his eyes flickered with something darker. Dr. Cunningham's death had sent them into a frenzy. But the accusation was worse than any curse they could have imagined. Poirot's gaze swept over each of them, calculating. "The motive," he continued, "is not greed. It is not the tomb or its treasures. No, this is revenge, born from a betrayal that goes back years." Evelyn gasped, her voice trembling. "Revenge? But Wauho would." Poirot held up a hand, silencing her. "It is not who you think. The true killer has been hiding in plain sight, using the curse as their shield, as a mask to hide their real intentions. The person who has been orchestrating these deaths is not just after the tomb's wealth. They seek justice for a betrayal long buried." He took a step closer to the group, his eyes narrowing with intent. "This goes back to the first archaeologist, Professor Thorn. He trusted someone here, and that person betrayed him." Rajiv's voice cut through the tension, his words edged with disbelief. "What are you suggesting, Poirot? That one of us is behind this? That we killed Cunningham?" Poirot didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the ancient journal and held it up for all to see. The cryptic words were now clearer, more ominous. He pointed to a passage near the end. "The man who stole my work, the man who would stop at nothing to claim it as his own, is here. And when he finds this tomb, he will have the last laugh." Poirot's gaze fell on Sir John. The archaeologist's face had gone pale, and his hands trembled ever so slightly. He was a man obsessed with the tomb, with its treasures, but Poirot had seen something more in him, something desperate, something driven by more than just academic curiosity. There was a past here, a betrayal that ran deeper than any curse. "Sir John," Poirot said, his voice low but unwavering, "you were the one Thorn trusted. You were his colleague, his confidant, but you betrayed him. You betrayed everyone here." The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Sir John's mouth went dry, his eyes darting to the others in panic. What are you talking about?" He stammered, but Poirot could see it in his eyes, the guilt, the fear. Sir John had never expected Poirot to uncover the truth. Poirot continued, his tone sharp and deliberate. "You were part of the team that found the tomb with Thorn, but you sabotaged his work. You stole his research and claimed it as your own. And when Thorn threatened to expose you, you had him erased. You left him to die in that tomb, knowing his secrets would die with him." The room was silent, except for the sound of Sir John's shallow breathing. The team stood frozen, unable to comprehend what Poirot had just revealed. Sir John had been hiding behind the mask of ambition, but it was his need for revenge, his fear of being exposed, that had driven him to murder. "Why? Why now?" Evelyn whispered, stepping back from Sir John. "Why kill all of us?" Poirot turned to her, his gaze soft but firm. "Because Sir John knew that Thorn's journal would be uncovered, and with it, the truth. He couldn't let that happen. So he used the curse to cover his tracks, to throw us off his scent. But now the truth is out, and the curse is nothing but a lie." The tension in the room was suffocating. Sir John took a step back, his face contorting with anger. "You don't understand. Thorny was going to ruin me. I did what I had to do. I had no choice. And you." His eyes darted to the others. "You're all just pawns. You were always going to be collateral damage." Poirot's voice cut through the air like a razor. "And now, Sir John, your time has come." The archaeologist lunged forward, a frantic desperation in his movements. But before anyone could react, Poirot raised his hand to stop him. And that's when the lights went out. A scream echoed through the tomb. The shadows grew thick and suffocating, the air heavy with a sense of finality. Poirot's mind raced, but before he could act, a figure moved in the dark, a flash of motion, a low whisper, and then the sound of a body hitting the ground. Poirot's heart stopped. Was it Sir John, or had someone else acted first? The team scrambled in the dark, their panic rising as they fumbled to find their bearings. The tomb had become their prison, and the killer's final move had yet to be revealed. Cliffhanger ending. As Poirot made his way toward the fallen body, a voice floated through the air. You don't know everything, Hercule." Poirot froze, his pulse quickening. The voice came from the shadows, but there was something unmistakable about it. It wasn't Sir John. Someone else was still playing their hand in this deadly game. The climax. The tension in the air was thick, so dense, it felt like the tomb itself was breathing. Each moment seemed stretched out, every heartbeat echoing in the stone walls. Poirot stood at the center of the room, eyes narrowed, his gaze shifting from one suspect to another. He had pieced together the web of lies, the whispered secrets, and the carefully crafted illusions. Yet something still felt incomplete. The pieces didn't fit, and the weight of the unspoken truth loomed larger than any curse could ever be. Poirot's sharp eyes rested on Miss Evelyn Drake, her face as pale as the stone tomb around them. She stood perfectly still, her hand trembling ever so slightly as she clutched the hem of her jacket. But it wasn't her exterior composure that Poirot was focused on, it was her past, her every movement, her every word. Evelyn had played the role of the innocent bystander, the quiet archaeologist who had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. She had wept at the deaths of her colleagues, her grief as believable as the curse that had seemingly haunted them all. But Poirot had always suspected that her tears were just another mask, her sorrow another well-rehearsed act. He had seen it in the way she reacted to the journal, how her eyes flickered with recognition when the name Thorne was mentioned. He had noticed the subtle shifts in her demeanor every time Sir John's guilt was brought up, too calm, too collected. She had been in control all along, playing everyone like pawns in a twisted game, hiding in plain sight. Poirot stood up straighter, his voice cutting through the silence. "Miss Drake, you have been very clever, I must admit. But in the end, there are no more masks to hide behind." Evelyn's lips parted, her breath quickening. What are you saying?" Poirot's gaze was unwavering, his voice quiet but heavy with accusation. "You, Miss Drake, are the one who has been orchestrating all of this. The murders, the curse, everything. It was you all along." Gasps echoed around the room as the team recoiled, eyes wide with disbelief. Evelyn's face paled further, her composure cracking for the first time since the first body had been discovered. But Poirot wasn't done. "The curse," Poirot continued, "was never a supernatural force. It was a tool of very carefully crafted distraction, one that made you all act in fear, in paranoia. You wanted everyone to be distracted, to blame the tomb, to fall victim to their own superstition." Evelyn took a shaky step back, her voice barely a whisper. "Number, you're wrong. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I never meant for any of this." Poirot's voice rose with certainty. "But you did. You knew exactly what you were doing. You were playing a long game. You wanted to eliminate those who stood in your way. Sir John, Rajiv, even Dr. Cunningham, each of them a threat to the secret you've been hiding." A chill ran down Evelyn's spine as Poirot's words cut deeper than any blade. He had uncovered the truth she had fought so hard to bury, her motive, her hidden rage, her twisted sense of justice. "You see," Poirot said, I had suspected your true identity long ago. Miss Evelyn Drake, the quiet archaeologist daughter of the first man to discover this tomb. Your father, Professor Thorne, was the one who first uncovered the tomb's secrets, but it was Sir John who led him astray. It was Sir John who betrayed him, who ignored his warnings in his reckless pursuit of fame and fortune. Evelyn's lips curled into a bitter smile. He was my father, Hercule, and you think you know what happened, but you don't. You never understood. He was a brilliant man. A man who deserved more than what Sir John gave him, more than what he was allowed to have. Poirot stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. And you sought revenge for your father's death. But not just revenge for a man. You sought revenge against the very ones who you believe robbed your father of his legacy. Sir John, Rajiv, Dr. Cunningham, they all played a part in the downfall of your father's career. Sir John, Rajiv, Dr. Cunningham, they all played a part in the downfall of your father's career. Evelyn's grip tightened on her jacket. Sir John was greedy. He didn't care about the truth, about preserving the tomb's history. He cared about himself. He made my father's life a nightmare, and when my father died, he buried him along with the truth. Poirot watched as her mask slipped further, the mask of the grieving archaeologist crumbling away to reveal something far darker, something born of a twisted sense of justice. And so, you decided to finish what your father started. You killed Sir John to avenge his betrayal. And then you turned your attention to anyone who might stand in your way. You used the curse to manipulate them, made them distrust each other. But in the end, it was always you, Evelyn, pulling the strings. Evelyn's face twisted with an emotion Poirot had seen only in the most dangerous of criminals. Pure rage. They all deserved it. They ruined my father's life. And now you've ruined everything. Poirot remained calm, unfazed by her outburst. You killed them alone by one, but you overlooked one thing. The curse was never the real danger. The real danger was you. For a moment, silence hung in the air, thick with tension. Then, in a final desperate act, Evelyn lunged at Poirot, her eyes wide with madness, her hands reaching for the truth she couldn't bear to face. But Poirot was already moving, his reflexes sharp, his mind ahead of hers. Before Evelyn could reach him, the lights in the tomb flickered and then, suddenly, went out. A scream tore through the darkness, followed by the unmistakable sound of a body hitting the cold stone floor. The room erupted into chaos, shouts and scrambling, as the team fumbled to turn on their flashlights. Poirot, his mind sharp as ever, stood still amidst the panic, his expression calm and calculating. But as the light from the torches fell upon Evelyn's crumpled form, it was clear the game was far from over. Cliffhanger ending. Poirot knelt beside her, his eyes narrowing. The truth had come to light, but the final twist was far from over. With Evelyn's confession, everything had seemed to fall into place, but there was still something that didn't sit right with Poirot. He turned to the others, his voice cool but edged with suspicion. "Why did she scream?" he muttered almost to himself. "There is something more. Something I have missed." And then, out of the shadows, a new figure stepped forward, a figure none of them had noticed before. The chilling words that followed sent a shock through the group. "I think you're forgetting someone, Hercule." The true mastermind had yet to reveal themselves.